Hello, my name is Joshua Mugabe. I welcome you to Musculoskeletal System. What are the organs that are part of the musculoskeletal system? The main organs and tissue that are part of the musculoskeletal system in a human are the cartilage, the bones, and the muscles. What are the functions of the musculoskeletal system? Musculoskeletal system has functions of supporting and protecting organs, maintaining the body's spatial conformation, motion of organs, limbs, and bodily portions, and nutrient storage, that is glycogen in the muscles, calcium and phosphorus in the bones. What type of tissues are the cartilaginous and the osseous tissues? Cartilaginous and osseous tissues are considered connective tissues since they are tissue within cells are relatively distinct from each other with a great amount of extracellular matrix and in the interstitial spaces. What are the cells that form the cartilaginous tissue? The main cells of the cartilages are the chondrocytes, originated from the chondroblast that secrete the interstitial matrix. They are also chondroclast cells with many lysosomes and responsible for the digestion and remodulation of the cartilaginous matrix. What is the constitution of the cartilaginous matrix? Cartilaginous matrix is made up of collagen fibers, mainly collagen type 2, and proteoglycans, proteins associated with glycosaminoglycans, chiefly hyaluronic acid. Proteoglycans provide a typical rigidity of the cartilages. What are some functions of the cartilages in the human body? Cartilages are responsible for the structure support of the nose and ears. Trachea, bronchi are also organs with cartilaginous structures that prevents the closing of these tubes. In the joints, there are cartilages that cover the bones, providing smooth surface to reduce friction of the joint movement. In the formation of the bones, cartilages act as the mold, and they are gradually substituted by the osseous tissues. What are the three main types of cells that form the osseous tissue? What are their functions? The three main types of the cell of the osseous tissues are osteoblasts, osteocytes, and osteoclasts. Osteoblasts are known as the bone-forming cells, since they are the cell that secretes the proteinaceous part of the bone matrix, that is collagen, glycoprotein, and proteoglycans. The bone matrix is the intercellular space where the amino substances of the bones are deposited. Osteocytes are differentiated mature osteoblasts. Formed after these cells are completely surrounded by the bone matrix. Osteocytes have the function of supporting the tissue. Osteoclasts are giant multinucleated cells that remodulate the osseous tissue. They are originated from the monocytes, and they contain many lysosomes. Osteoblasts secrete enzymes that digest the osseous matrix, creating canals throughout the tissues. What is the bone matrix? What is its main components? Bone matrix is the content that fills the intercellular space of the osseous tissue. The bone matrix is made up of amino substances, about 5%, mainly phosphorus and calcium salts, and organic substances around 95%, mainly collagen, glycoproteins, and proteoglycans. What are the main Haversian canals and Volkmann's canal of the bones? Is osseous tissue vascularized? The Haversian canals are longitudinal canals present in the osseous tissue, within which blood vessels and nerves pass. The osseous tissue distributes itself in concentric manner around these canals. The Volkmann's canal are communication between the Haversian canals. Osseous tissue is highly vascularized in its interior. What is the function of the osseous tissue? The main function of the osseous tissue are to provide structure, rigidity to the body, and to delineate the spatial positioning of other tissues and organs, to support the body weight, to serve as a site for mineral storage, mainly calcium and phosphorus. To form protective structures for important organs like the brain, spinal cord, heart, and the lungs, to work as the liver and support the muscles, providing movement to certain bone marrows where hematopoiesis occurs. What are the flat bones and the long bones? The main bones of the body may be classified as flat or long bones. There are bones not classified into these categories. For example, flat bones of the skull, the ribs, hip bones, scapula, and sternum. Examples of long bones are the humerus, radius, ulna, and the femur, tibia, and the fibula. What are the types of muscle tissues? What are the morphological feature that differentiate them, those types. The three types of muscle tissues: the skeletal striated muscle tissue, cardiac striated muscle tissue, and smooth muscle tissues. Striated muscle present under microscopic view transverse strips, and their fiber cells are multinucleated in the skeleton. Many have more than one nucleus, that is in the cardiac. The smooth muscle does not present transverse strips, and it has a spindle-shaped fiber, each with only one nucleus. Which type of muscle tissue that moves the bone? The bones are moved by skeletal striated muscles. These muscles are voluntary, meaning controlled by variation. Which is the type of muscle tissue that contracts and relaxes the heart chambers? Myocardium of the heart is made up of cardiac striated muscle tissue. Which type of muscle tissue that performs peristaltic movement of the intestines? The smooth muscle tissue is responsible for the peristaltic movement of the intestine. Smooth muscles are not controlled by variation. Which types of muscle tissue that help to push the food down the esophagus? The esophageal wall, it is superior portion made of skeletal striated muscle. The inferior portion is made up of smooth muscles. The intermediate portion, there are skeletal striated and smooth muscles. All of these muscles are important to push the food down towards the stomach. How is the stripped portion of the striated muscle cells formed? The functional unit of the muscle fiber are the sarcomeres. Within the sarcomere, blocks of actin and myosin molecules are posed in organized manner. Sarcomere aligns in the sequence forming myofibrils that are longitudinal placed in the cytoplasm of the muscle fiber or cells. The grouping of consecutive blocks of actin and myosin in parallel filaments creates the stripped pattern of the striated muscle tissue seen under the microscope. What are sarcomeres? Sarcomeres are the contractile unit of muscle tissue formed by alternating actin blocks, thin filaments, and myosin block, which are thick filaments. Several sarcomere placed in a linear sequence form a myofibril. Therefore, one muscle fiber or cell has many myofibrils made up of sarcomeres. The compartment where myofibrils are inserted are delimited by the excitable membrane known as sarcolemma. The sarcolemma is the plasma membrane of the muscle cell. What are the main proteins that constitute the sarcomere? What is the function of those molecules in the muscle cells? In the sarcomere, there are organized actin and myosin blocks. Troponin and tropomyosin also appear associated to actin. The actin molecule, when activated by calcium ions liberated in the proximity of the sarcomere, are pulled by myosin molecules. This interaction between actin and myosin shortens the microfibril, originating the phenomenon of muscle contraction. What are the position of actin and myosin molecules in the sarcomere before and during muscle contraction? Schematically, actin filaments attached perpendicularly to both sarcomere extremities, longitudinal sides, can contact with myosin filament positioned in the middle of the sarcomere and in parallel to the actin filaments. Before the contraction, the sarcomere are extended, that means relaxed, since the contact between actin and myosin filament is only made by their extremities. During contraction, actin filaments slide along the myosin filament and the sarcomeres shorten. How do calcium ions participate in muscle contraction? Why do both muscle contraction and muscle relaxation spend energy? In the muscle cell, calcium ions are stored within the sarcoplasmic reticulum. When motor neuron emits stimulus for the muscle contraction, neurotransmitters called acetylcholine are released in the neuromuscular junction, and the sarcolemma is excited. The excitation is a conduit of the sarcoplasmic reticulum that then releases calcium ions in the sarcomeres. The sarcomeres, the calcium ions bind to troponin molecule associated with actin, activating myosin binding site of the actin. Myosin then able to bind to actin, pulls the proteins, and the sarcomere shortens. The summation of the simultaneous contraction of the sarcomeres and microfibril constitutes to the muscle contraction. During muscle relaxation, calcium ions return back to the sarcoplasmic reticulum. For the myosin to bind to actin, thus for the contraction to occur, hydrolysis of one ATP molecule is necessary. During relaxation, the return of calcium ions to the sarcoplasmic reticulum is an active process that spends ATP too. So both muscle contraction and relaxation are energy spending processes. What is myoglobin? What is the function of this molecule in the muscle tissue? Myoglobin is a pigment similar to hemoglobin, present in the muscle fiber. Myoglobin has a great affinity for oxygen. It keeps oxygen bound and releases the gas under strenuous muscle work. Myoglobin acts as an oxygen reserve for the muscle cells. How does phosphocreatine act in the muscle contraction and relaxation? Phosphocreatine is a means of energy storage for the muscle cells. During the relaxed period, ATP molecules are made by aerobic cellular respiration, transfer highly energized phosphate groups to form phosphocreatine. These exercise periods, phosphocreatine and ADP resynthesizes ATP to dispose energy for muscle contraction. What happens when oxygen supply is insufficient to maintain aerobic respiration during muscle exercise? If oxygen from hemoglobin and myoglobin is not enough, energy supply of the muscle cells, the cell begins to do lactic fermentation in an attempt to compensate for the deficiency. The lactic fermentation releases lactic acid, and these substances cause muscle fatigue and predisposes the muscle to cramps. What is the neurotransmitter and the neuromuscular junction? And how does the nervous system trigger muscle contraction? The nerve cells that trigger muscle contraction are the motor neurons. Neurotransmitter of the motor neuron is acetylcholine. When motor neuron is excited, the demoralizing current flows along the membrane of its axon until reaching the synapse at the neuromuscular junction. The neuroimpulse passage zone between the axon extremity and the sarcolemma. Near the axon extremity, the depolarization allowed the entrance of calcium ions into the axon. Note that calcium is also relevant here. The calcium ions stimulate the neuron to release acetylcholine in the synapse. Acetylcholine then binds the special receptor on the outer surface of the sarcolemma. Permeability of this membrane is altered, and the action potential is created. The depolarization is then conduced along the sarcolemma to the sarcolemmoplasmic reticulum, that thus releases calcium ions for the sarcomere contraction. To increase the strength of the muscle work, is the muscle contraction intensely increased? An increase in the strength of the muscle work is not achieved by increase in the intensity of stimulation of each muscle fiber. Muscle fiber obeys the all or nothing rule, i.e., its contraction strength is only one and cannot be increased. When the body needs to increase the strength of the muscle work, the phenomenon known as spatial summation occurs. When muscle fibers are recruited in addition to the fiber already in action, so the strength of the muscle contraction increases only when the number of active muscle cells increases. What is the difference between spatial summation and temporal summation of muscle fibers? What is tentane? Spatial summation is the recruiting of new muscle fibers to increase the muscle strength. Temporal summation occurs when a muscle fiber is continuously stimulated to contract without being able to conclude relaxation. The permeance of muscle fiber under continuous state of contraction by temporal summation is known as tentane. For example, clinical condition of patient contaminated by toxin and of tetanus bacteria. Tentane ends when all the available energy for the contraction is spent and when the stimulus ceases. Thank you very much for participating in Musculoskeletal System. Please do like, share, and subscribe.